Well, for some analysis on what may now be ahead for Zimbabwe, I'm very pleased to be joined by the Zimbabwean political scientist, Dr. Chipo Dendere. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. I wonder, first of all, what you think of what Nelson Chamisa may do next. Will he challenge these results in court?
I think that the court route is definitely something they are looking forward to engaging. But more importantly, I think they will make an emphasis on the fact that the electoral process itself on election day was marred. As you mentioned earlier, the about 23% of urban voters in Harare were the only ones who had access to the ballot in time. Harare itself had nearly 1 million voters. This means that almost 700,000 voters in Harare were disenfranchised. And the same happened across urban areas in the country. So they will take the court route. They will also need to bring information to show that the issues on election day did disenfranchise a lot of voters. The challenge right now is that the numbers that are available from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission are the doctored numbers, or at least the numbers that are unclear. As of this afternoon, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission website was down, so a lot of academics are trying to download the data so that we can analyze it ourselves and see where they got the numbers that they announced on Saturday, but that data is still not available. But I do think they're going to go to the courts, they're going to engage the international community, they're going to try every route that's possible and available to them.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those options then in a bit more detail. If Nelson Chamisa does decide to challenge through the courts, as you suggest he will that process be free and fair? Can he trust the judicial system?
I think you can't trust the judicial system, but what it does is that this is an open space for them to present their evidence to the world. So not just to the courts, but to the Zimbabweans as well, who might not be clear on where the rigging took place, on where the disparities are. And then I think the courts will find themselves in a difficult position because if the evidence is strong, they know that the world is watching. And so in a lot of autocratic regimes, what matters is to have the world watching the process as it's unfolding. So the court process is really an opportunity for the opposition to sell their case to the world and say, this is the evidence that we have. These are the things that we think were done wrong, and this is how we think this should be rectified.
And talking then of the response of the international community, we've heard, as you've mentioned as well, that international observers say the election process didn't go freely enough. But do you want to see a greater response now from international actors? I'm thinking of the African Union, for example.
Absolutely. But the first thing to note is that this is the first time in Zimbabwean history that SADC and the African Union have come out and said that Zimbabwean elections were not free and fair. In fact, in 2008, when the rest of the world was saying these elections have been shambolic, these elections were not great, SADC and the AU looked away. So what happened with SADC and the African Union was unexpected. I'm not sure that they will go any stronger. I understand that this afternoon the chair of SADC was on a media tour standing by their position. I think the European Union, the Carter Center, the Commonwealth also say the same thing. But I think the global community has a lot of things that they're paying attention to that they might stop talking about Zimbabwe, which is why I think the court case then becomes really important to keep reminding people, say, hey, you guys, don't look away. There is massive fraud of the will of the people that's just taken place. But I do think that the global community has to be really firm. A lot of the reports kept saying, well, the election environment was completely peaceful, which is not entirely true, as we know that a number of opposition activists were either beaten up, and we know that 2 people lost their lives leading up to the election.
And do you fear more violence now? Because there was also unrest after the 2018 election, wasn't there?
My understanding is that everybody in Harare is being very apprehensive. People are being super careful. I think that the government is always, as they showed us in 2018, that they are always willing to use violence. But I also think that Zimbabweans have experienced a lot of violence. That the citizens themselves would rather lose income than lose their lives, so they will stay away. They'll stay away from the streets. They will take caution. But again, all of this also depends on what Nelson Chamisa does next. What message does he send to his supporters?
Dr. Chipo Dendere, we really appreciate your time and your analysis. Thanks very much.
Thank you.